Welcome, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being part of our budget workshop number 3. Tonight we're going to discuss the 2021 budget draft 2. Before we begin, though, I just want to note that in the event that we have a technical difficulty which requires us to take down this meeting, we will reschedule the meeting at a later date next week. More information to follow on our website. Again, if there is a terminal or fatal technology issue that does not allow us to continue with the meeting, it will be rescheduled for next week. Information on that will be posted on our website. We will certainly do our best to communicate that to everyone. So tonight, again, this is our 3rd budget workshop. In attendance is our Board of Education, who are currently remoted in. My name is Jason Van Fosten, Superintendent of Schools. Mr. Jeff Lamoureux, our Assistant Superintendent, and our Board of Education Clerk, Michelle Andrews, are all in attendance. Please note at the bottom that if there are questions that come up as a result of this budget workshop, that you have that information and those links to ask questions. As a budget workshop, this is a workshop for the Board of Education. There's not a question and answer session for public. If the public has a question regarding any of the content, they can certainly bring it up in the general meeting, which is after this, or can reach out to those using those links as well. Just a reminder, as our 3rd budget workshop, the next budget workshop after tonight is our next Board of Education meeting, which is April 9th. You'll know where the location and time. And then April 20th, budget adoption for our May 19th budget vote. And we will talk a little bit about that later. Obviously, in light of what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic in New York, there have been conversations around whether or not to change that date based on the social distancing criteria that currently is in place. So more information to follow, but right now we are planning as if May 19th will be the date. Again, just a reminder of what we are discussing tonight, but also what we have discussed and what we will discuss tonight is a second draft review of the 2021 budget. April 9th will be our final recommendations, and then budget adoption will be April 20th. That's the time when the budget number, the final budget amount, is approved for then the vote. So we still have quite a bit of work to do, and I would like to first begin by welcoming from the Central Business Office, Mrs. Cynthia Wombold. Cynthia, thank you for being in attendance tonight.
Hi, everyone.
So I know every meeting we have started with a review of our guiding principles. The 2021 budget development is no different. And before we began our conversations and discussions, we want to remind everyone that we have 3 principles that we work off of. Number 1, we want to deliver a premier education to all students that our community can afford and will support. We want to provide a well-rounded PK-12 educational program that meets all students' needs. And we want to make sure that the financial health and sustainability of the district is at the forefront. So these 3 guiding principles are what is leading us to the development or through the development process. So just a little review to catch everyone up. On January 23rd was our first budget workshop. We looked at some long-range projections. We also looked at our current budget health. And currently, for the 19-20 budget, we are running about a $500,000 deficit as a result of some unexpected and unbudgeted increases to our special ed and our BOCES alternative ed placements. And I know we've addressed this with the board previously. We are using fund balance and reserves to pay for those, which is the reason why you have to have fund balance and reserves when you have unexpected. So for this current school year, this deficit is being addressed, but when you projected the next 4 years, and then again, this is the work of our central business office, as we've all said, the numbers don't look good. And for 2021, we have around a $1.6 million structural deficit, and at the very bottom, and we'll get into the specifics, but if you look at the very bottom, these are the underlying variables that we use when we project out for revenues and expenditures. And it doesn't take an accountant to see that when your expenditures are increasing at 3.6 and your revenue is only projected to increase by 2%, you have a structural deficit moving forward. So again, we have a structural deficit today and in the foreseeable future based on the fact that expenditures are exceeding revenue. And we identified the rationale and variables and reasons for that. We have health insurance costs that continue to grow, we have special education costs that have continued to grow, and we have some retirement costs as well, coupled with the fact that our tax levy limit formula drives how much we can ask our community, and the fact that state aid, which is derived by, obviously, the state government and what they're able to provide, is a number that we do not control. So when you add all of those variables up, there's very little control that a district has on costs. And when you can't tax your community more to offset those because of this formula through the tax levy limit law, it just makes it that much difficult. So we've discussed all this. I just wanted to bring everyone up and anyone who's listening tonight that this is what we're currently working under. So for tonight, we recognize that we had a significant deficit that we have to address. We are using the following strategies. We are not filling open positions where we can, and we'll have some more conversations around that because that's an area that we are going to investigate further. We know we need to reduce staffing across all areas, including instructional and non-instructional, to reach that deficit. We are reducing other budget lines, and you'll see what those items are that we've identified. And we're obviously reducing contracted services, and that primarily falls under our BOCES services that we use. So these are the strategies that we have been identifying since January, and actually probably more towards December. But it's important to note that in light of the last 3 weeks, the entire country, New York State, and our local region has been completely flipped on its back. As everyone knows, what we're dealing with right now with this pandemic, it is having a massive impact on New York State in particular, and we are getting more and more information daily, both from the comptroller's office, from the governor's office, that we can expect significant impact financially. So I put up here a couple bullets because in talking with Jeff and Cynthia, and then talking with our other area superintendents, and like I said, with the governor's office, the comptroller's office, these are legitimate items that we have to be prepared for. At best case scenario, we would get what the executive proposal was in January. And if you recall, that was around a little over $400,000 positive when you take out building aid. That's our best case scenario. Worst case scenario is, and this just came out today, that quarterly the state is going to review tax receipts and money coming in to determine if they can continue to provide the aid that they have pledged as of March. So the reality is we could see reductions in our state aid over the course of next year as the state determines that they don't have the money to provide us. And I don't know if you want to comment any further on that, Cynthia?
That is certainly a concern at this point, whether they do it quarterly or however it would happen. We do expect there could potentially be state aid cuts during the year next year. We just don't know how much at this point.
So the impact for us would be, if the revenue's not coming in, then we would have to make mid-year reductions in expenditures as well. And that is obviously a very difficult process because we build a budget to educate students for 40 weeks, and if we have to make reductions mid-year, obviously you have to be cognizant of what you're impacting, and the impact on services there's going to be an impact on services. It's just a matter of where and how severe. So that is something that we have to keep in the forefront. You'll note reduced state aid for 2021. Best case scenario is we get what the executive proposed, but there's a possibility we don't, and we actually get less than what we thought we were getting. Long-term impact on TRS and ERS, that's more to do with in outer years. As the stock market has taken a significant hit, there may be the need to put more money, invest more money into it, i.e. an expense on the district TRS and ERS pension costs to offset that. And then the last item is with interest rates at zero, we do have interest income that comes in. And as CBO and Cynthia have noted, there's a possibility that that income will not come in. And while it's not millions of dollars, all revenue at this point is needed. So those 4 bullets are items that we are going to have to mitigate and deal with over the next couple weeks until we know when the state budget is finalized. The next item, and we've talked about this, but this takes on a whole new meaning if we have to make mid-year reductions and or don't have money to cover mid-year revenue reductions. So right now, we are using around 1.1 million in reserves. We were going to make reductions of around 1.3, but we're thinking that 1.6, which is the actual structural deficit, is more in line to allow us to deal with the number 1, which is potential for less state aid. So that would require us to identify an additional $300,000 to achieve that 1.6. We're at around 1.3. We need around $300,000 more to hit 1.6. So you'll see in the in future slides how we plan on addressing that. And then last budget meeting, we had said we were considering asking the community to exceed the tax levy. And so I simply put this out there because the board, obviously it's your decision ultimately if you want to still consider that. But our feeling was if you look at what's going on right now and the historic unemployment claims that have just occurred, and obviously not knowing recession, what the impact is going to totally be for the region and state, we didn't feel like exceeding the tax levy limit is a smart idea at this point, and we'll talk about that more. So I want to pause there for board members to just kind of reflect, take that in, and ask any questions regarding these new factors that we now are kind of having to deal with and or work through.
So seems to me like that's going to be a statewide issue, not just a Maine-Endwell issue. Right? Mid-year reductions in state aid,
Everyone in the region is going to be going through this. You're correct.
right.
Anyone else?
I think your bullet about the mid-year reductions is something that we'll have to circle back to, but I'm appreciative of how comprehensive your first 3 factors to consider are, Jason. That's a very nice job.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with not exceeding the tax levy this year. Just, with everything that's going on, and I don't know how, our community there is, if we have a lot of people going on unemployment and how families are being affected. So I do think it is the right decision to not exceed the tax levy.
Thanks, Melinda. Thanks, Jamie. Anyone else before we move on? I don't want to move on before everyone's had a chance to weigh in. Okay.
Much to say about that.
No, you're right. Okay. Yeah, right. So the next couple slides, which are going to address our current budget, these numbers have not changed. And Cynthia and Jeff and I met, and I said, well, have the numbers changed? And the reality is they have not. So we've made decisions to, at this point, increase the budget by about 1.5 or 2.83%. However, these numbers will change based on some of the new projections that we put together. So for tonight, I didn't want to show a change until we had a conversation around what we're thinking. And so, as I
Jason,
mentioned,
I do have a question about this slide.
yep.
Obviously, we saw these slides, they were posted to board docs and ahead of the meeting. The line, are all the savings in the subsequent slides built into this?
1.3 million were.
Okay. So we're talking about still increasing, and I'm just, not to pick on anything, our materials and supplies by 4.42%.
Well, and that's why there are items that we obviously can still look at. However, with the materials and supplies, not that we can't, Greg, but with the growing enrollment that we've experienced, particularly at Homer Brink, we've had to keep money earmarked for some of that growth.
I mean, that's a good answer, because I would say, if that wasn't the answer, I would say, well, why don't you just hold it where you spent last year, right? Because that's always a question, especially as things keep getting worse,
Greg, just to keep in mind too, that's just not instructional material and supplies. That could be
Right.
for building and grounds, transportation. So, toilet, just stuff that we just have to normally buy. If the prices are going up, and like Jason said, enrollment's going up, we're still having to buy quite a large chunk of material and supplies. We just can't say we have to keep it even. But we have let the building principals know that we'll probably be coming back to them to have a look even further at the material and supplies budget to whack it a little bit if we have to.
I mean, I know it's a small number. Right? It's just as an example, right? Like workman's comp, right? I wasn't happy when I saw that, there was a 7% increase. They're typically in pretty good financial condition, right? But then, we're the highest school district in number of claims.
Right.
Again, so, it's, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place there.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I just, that's good. Can move on.
Yes, no, thanks. So you've seen this before, and this is the item that we identified that by using almost 1.2 million in reserve, that is the money that could help us offset some of the loss of state aid, at least for 1 year. So by us using more reserves than we should or would like to, that's not creating that cushion that we need. So this is an area that we'll address, but I wanted to highlight that again because that is something that CDO has said repeatedly. That number should be going down, not up. So we're going to try and address some of that through the next couple budget workshops. So again, these numbers have not changed, but we expect them to based on the rest of this presentation. So the first, we had talked about some options to address the 1.3 deficit that now we're looking more towards 1.6. And so the next three options are positions, programs that we've identified, not because they're expendable, but because we can continue to meet those three principles. Again, there will be an impact, but we feel we could still keep the whole somewhat intact. So I'm going to go through option one, and then I'll go through each option. But please ask questions as we go through this, so that you don't feel like you can't ask any questions or interrupt. So the reason for option A, which is heavy instructional reductions, there are 11 total, and you'll see that in future slides. What makes this option unique is it would it would result in us not filling any of the retirements. So we currently have 6 retirements. And our plan was to fill at least 3 of them. And I'll get to that. However, if we were to not fill any of them,
Jason, I've lost the audio.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but there was I don't know if there was something unmuted. There was like a echo sound separate from your audio.
I've lost the any.
Yeah, there was an audio issue.
Yeah, we're working with Mr. Balzani. I believe he has an audio issue right now. Jamie, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I can
Okay.
hear the voice, but there is no clarity. I can't understand it, but I can hear. I have sound, but it's garbled.
Okay.
Not so much from you, Jason, but absolutely, I got nothing of what Greg added in his commentary, which is okay. I understand, but I'm just saying your voice is fairly clear. Anyone else who speaks sounds like Mickey Mouse sounds in the background.
Okay. I'm going to just pause for 30 seconds. We're going to just make sure we can, everyone can. All right. Jamie, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So we are going to try and keep everyone muted, and then when someone wants to talk, Tom will unmute you. That should keep the multiple voices coming in. So I apologize for that, but we'll try and make it work. I know Pete is having an audio issue. So option A.
Okay.
Option A, again, the 6 positions up top, there would be no layoffs. We would just we would not fill those openings. And where I put a no, again, there will be an impact, but we feel we can consolidate and or reduce electives, not eliminate electives. We can increase class sizes, not eliminate classes. And when we say consolidate services, again, fewer resources to do the same type of work, but it can be done. So I don't want to give any impression that this is all no impact. There will be an impact, but we believe we can still provide a base service that we currently are. When we get to reductions for option A, none of these options are easy. I'm actually going to start with the bottom. We currently have 6th grade teaming, which is a model. We had eliminated that in 12, 13, 13, 14. We brought it back because of the value, but it is a model that we can and have done differently. So 6th grade can become junior high model versus the teaming model. Not ideal, but doable. When it comes to the librarian, the business, and the technology, we have shared a librarian before. Again, not ideal. That would happen at the elementary level. We did it for a year or 2, but it again, wasn't ideal, but we've done it. And then reducing one business and one technology would still allow us to have a business and technology program, but it would reduce the ability to offer all the classes we have, and then obviously there would be potential increase in class sizes. Those would be at the secondary level. So this is not none of these are ideal, but this would be the most heavy impact on instructional. Note though, it would have 6 of the 11 would not be layoffs. So the next part of option A are all these other items that we've talked about, that we've discussed, that we've looked at, that we feel we can reduce. And I'm going to go through all of these line by line because this same slide, these same reductions are in every option. They don't change. So I'm going to start with budget requests. We had simply said across the board, and again, going back to Greg, your question regarding materials and supplies, budget requests is a wide open. We'll just, if we need to go down 40,000, we're going to go across the board and make reductions of 40,000. Air temp service contract, if we eliminated the current contract we have, that would save us $50,000. That's mainly a preventative maintenance service contract that allows us to keep all of our HVAC equipment serviced. Obviously, we would have to do that in-house, but that would be a $50,000 savings if we did not contract with air temp. Strategic planning would be the service and the work that we've done with Sean Brady. We would eliminate that. And I'll explain what BOCES aidable means in a second. Summer professional development for instructional staff, we would eliminate $25,000. We would eliminate equipment by $10,000. We would eliminate some of our lead teacher and team leaders, total of $40,000. The climate survey, we would potentially limit, and I should have asterisked that because New York State is requiring school districts, it isn't a mandate yet, but it's coming, to have climate surveys for stakeholders. So this could be an area that we remove because of the mandate. Alternative placements, so these are non-special ed. These are anything from our New Vision classes to East Learning Center, West Learning Center, and everything in between. But we would look to go down there.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
What would happen if the state mandated a climate survey and we didn't do it?
The state education police would probably knock on our door, and I'm being facetious. Probably nothing. We would be out of compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd have a hard time if they're cutting our aid mid-year and they're, and we're mandating a climate survey.
Yeah. Agreed. So it's on there, Greg. It's on there.
Sorry, I just had to make that statement.
It's part of ESSA.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of ESSA, but there's so many accountability measures such as attendance and such that are also part of ESSA that you can't necessarily have with Fidelity right now. That I think your point is well taken. It's probably not going to be something that's their biggest fish to fry, but it is part of your accountability through the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is our kind of school's new doctrine. But again, in perspective, I think you're spot on.
I think that's probably Peter trying to say something, but it sounds really bad.
Yeah, that's correct.
Pete, you might have to call in with the phone. I think there's a way to call in with the phone that might make it clear. Anyway. Okay, that's, I'm just,
Thanks, Jamie.
I'm willing to take an audit hit for that when we're, laying people off. It just, anyway.
Gotcha.
Okay.
No, point taken. And thanks, Jamie, for that additional information.
Thanks.
Summer enrichment would be our, the students, our summer enrichment program that we've done with our early kindergarten teachers the last 4 years at Maine Memorial. We would eliminate that program. Technology purchases where it says above categorical aid, meaning we would only spend money we would only spend our aid money, not anything over our aid money. So state aid dictates what you can spend that money on. We wouldn't spend over that. So that's why that $25,000 is up there. We would reduce 3 of our athletic teams, 2 modified teams that have not been identified, and the indoor track. We would have a reduction, and that's probably an elimination of conferences, is probably the better word for that. And then we would target about $25,000 in overtime and extra hours, again, with an asterisk that depending on circumstances, that may not be 100% doable. The number could be higher, it could be much lower, but we're going to target around $25,000 in extra hours and overtime. Now, when you add all those up, it's almost $500,000. When you see the line underneath it, the total net savings is because where it says BOCES aidable, we are generating aid on those expenses, on those costs. So the net savings after BOCES aid is only around $287,000. So we're going to use 477 as a number, but when you net it with the aid, it's actually a net of only 287. So not to confuse, but I think it's important that we see that distinction. So I'll stop there because this you're going to see 3 more times and nothing else is going to change. It's going to look the same. Is there any other questions or just comments on these items?
No, you did a good job identifying those, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there's more conversation to take place. Don't feel like this is not a final recommendation. We just wanted you to see what we're thinking right now. Okay. We do have a question from Mr. Balzani, so we're gonna note it.
Are the 2 special ed positions mandated? I agree with Greg that we can take that hit on the climate study.
So Mr. Balzani asked if the 2 special ed positions, if we did not fill, are mandated. And in talking with Vanessa DeBrava has looked at our programming and determined that we could definitely go down the 2 special ed positions without impacting mandated services. So that was Mr. Balzani's first question. And then he also was in agreement with the climate survey. If we had to reduce it, he understands the reason for that. Thanks, Mr. Balzani. So in total, option A would be about $1.4 million. And if we're going to get to 1.6, we recognize there's still some work to do using this option. So now I'm going to go to option B. Option B, starting with the first, retirement's not replaced, so we would not replace the 2 special ed or the reading, but we would replace, going back to the other option, the 712 English, 712 math, and school counselor. So we would replace those positions. We would reduce the teaming model, which is the 2 elementary positions because it's a 6th grade position. And then we would have reductions in our non-instructional positions. And so when we identified positions that we thought we could try and make it work, these were the positions. We would have a reduction in our transportation department of an auto mechanic. We would have a reduction in our buildings of a general mechanic. We would eliminate our central registration, which is currently out of the district office. We would reduce teacher aide positions by 5. We would reduce our teaching assistants, which there are currently 4. And we would reduce a senior typist position in the district office. So those would be, option B would have 18 positions versus 11 from option A, but adding in some non-instructional positions. Also, we would add to option B the same group of reductions that we identified in option A for a grand total in this option of almost 1.6 million. You'll note 3 of the instructional would be not filling retirements, 2 layoffs, 13 layoffs in non-instructional, and not all layoffs, I take that back. That's probably around 10 layoffs because we do have some retirements that we would not be filling, and then the other, and that would be 1.5, almost the 1.6 that we're targeting. Any questions on option B?
So Jason, just to clarify, the elementary, although they say the middle school teaming model, that would be based on a seniority and a movement of staff. That doesn't mean those, it's not people specific, correct?
That's correct. It would be elementary seniority would be how that would be addressed, correct?
Okay, yep.
So I will say for option B, some of the positions we've identified in the non-instructional would be difficult. And so option C was trying to take a blend of option A and B to try to balance out overall need across the district. So if you look at option C, it's a blend of the two. We're not filling those three positions, but we would be replacing, like I said earlier, the math, the English, and the counselor. We would be making reductions to the teaming model, and we would be reducing one technology position and one business position in the secondary level. And then we would be reducing fewer non-instructional, but we would be still the 5 teacher aides, 4 teaching assistants, and the senior typist in the district office. When you take this package, or this option, plus all of the reductions we've already identified, we would be looking at a savings of almost 1.6 million too, as well. So I know we talked about wanting to look at some options. We are not proposing a particular option tonight, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to see what we're looking at. There still is work to do, but these are some of the options that we're working on. And before I go forward with any recommendations, preliminary recommendations, I wanted to pause and just ask if there's any questions, again, about A, B, or C.
Jason, would you mind, you mentioned for option B, you mentioned that, that it would be a challenge, I think, to particularly the non-instructional. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what you meant by that?
You got it. So I know in our transportation department, we currently have 3 full-time auto mechanics to handle the 42 buses and then all the other vehicles that we have, van, SUV. There is a ratio that the DOT recommends to have mechanic to vehicle. And Mike Auble has said that would put us in a real difficult position to not have that 3rd mechanic, knowing that DOT inspections are critical and obviously necessary for us to drive our buses. However, we didn't put it up unless we didn't think, at least if we had to make it work, we could, but that one definitely is not ideal. And there's aid on top of that from transportation aid that pays for a significant amount of that salary. So again, it's not a true savings because of the aid we're losing and paying for, but it's a position that, again, we thought we could if we absolutely had to. I'll let Jeff talk about general mechanic, though, because he can explain the current setup and where that might be an issue.
So we have one general mechanic in each of our buildings. So I said to Jason, if we were going to go down to general mechanic and look to reduce our air temp contract, it probably that would make a lot of sense, because most of the work that air temp does in the buildings is work that's above the skill level of our general mechanics. So we have about a $175,000 service contract with air temp. You see about $50,000 worth of savings, because if they're not coming in doing PM work and fixing issues as part of their contract that don't cost us money outside of the contract, we would now, on a routine service call, we're paying for that, like we did probably 6-7 years ago before we had this contract in place. So I just said it's really a tough model, not only for that reason, but also our general mechanics. If you look at Homer Brink and you look at, for instance, Maine Memorial, there's a custodian and a general mechanic there from 6 to 2:30 each day. If there's not a general mechanic in each building, a lot of the time the general mechanic's doing actual custodial work, setting up cafeterias, helping with cleanup on the breakfast program. So I don't know if that model would work, but we're just trying to look at everything we can.
And then central registration, we added central registration about 4 years ago, partly because we had less administrative assistant support in the main offices in the school, each building. And so by taking registration out of the building, it just freed up the secretaries and the senior typists to do more work. So by removing that out of the DO and putting it back in the buildings, it will certainly add more work to the buildings. But again, we've done it without it. We can certainly go without it. But that's, the other concern is having one hand touch all of that data versus four hands. We found that our accuracy and efficiencies were significant when we had the central registration. But again, we could work without. The teacher aide and the teaching assistants, there's nothing really more to say other than it would be less support in the buildings for staff and for, in some regards, students. So, really nothing more to say other than we would just have to do more with less or not provide as much of the services that we currently have. That would not be, though, that would not impact mandated support. So we know we have students that require one-on-one aids. We wouldn't be impacting that, but it would be more of the general support. And then DO, Vicki, again, it's one of those where just we're going to have to do more with less, and we felt like we have a retirement. We're not going to fill that retirement. It just made sense at that point to do that, and so, we'll make it work.
Okay, I really appreciate all that detail because it helps me understand, the differences between the options. The other question I have, and I wonder if you have an opinion at this point, but when I look at all three of the different options, and I see things like special ed and if we can flip through to some of the other options, like technology and business and the counselor position. So I think about, of the three options, do you have an opinion about whether any one of them or some of them have a greater or lesser impact on? So when I think about, not having a counselor in a building or not having or having one less or two less special ed or one less business or one less technology, what is your opinion on what you think the impact is more long-term, to have that kind of counseling and special ed support in buildings, or to have, the options for technology and business for students? What is that going to mean for them long-term as far as their ability to progress through the whole, K through 12 programming, but also where's that going to position them, when they're getting ready to graduate? Or is that a little bit too far down the road?
No, I mean, it's a great question, and unfortunately, there's not a great answer. Every position that we are putting up here is going to have an impact on something, and our goal was to try and not completely eliminate or substantially impact one particular area. I think Vanessa has done a great job looking at the special ed services to say, we can make it work. And I have to trust her when she says, listen, we can make this work. She knows better than anybody what we can and can't not do. So I feel very comfortable with that. When I look at a counselor position versus, the secondary positions of technology and business, sadly, our school population, and we're seeing it, every day, and through this latest pandemic, we have significant mental health issues. We have significant social emotional issues. To go down mental health support at this time could put a strain potentially. But I also say, but then not having opportunities for kids to take electives and to do some of the career readiness work that we're trying to do is equally impactful. So, sadly, my opinion would be whatever option we pick has the least impact on the most programs, if that makes sense.
Jason, I don't think you have any more.
No, thank you, Jason.
Okay. So looking at these options, right? The retirements that you're not replacing has dropped from one option to the other. Does that mean you would replace those you would actually replace those teachers that are coming off the list, right? You had 6 on this chart, okay, and 5 reductions. I'm just trying to understand, would you replace the secondary math 7 through 12 on, right, on the chart you're showing right now, under option B, for instance?
Yes, under B and C, the first 3 positions would be replaced. That's correct.
Okay, but still, so how could we afford to eliminate them in option A? But, you know, I mean, is that just an assessment of, somebody must be feeding back, because I think that might be me coming through
No,
somebody
I
else's
think
computer.
it's Peter keeps unmuting his mic. I can see it at the bottom.
Oh, okay. But anyway, is option, so is that just a, you know, kind of an analysis of what, you know, if we're gonna replace those positions, it would be less of an impact than, you know, eliminating a technology and a business teacher, for instance?
No, I get your question. So when we look at option A, if you look at it purely from the standpoint of impact to individuals, there would be 5 reductions in option A, because I don't consider the 6 retirements not being replaced as, now, so forgive me, I don't want to be semantics, layoffs. So the 6 positions not filled are not layoffs. We just would not
Right,
fill those positions.
understood.
But the impact of the first 2 would definitely be felt, specifically in the high school. And then obviously the school counselor, you know, going back to what I had said earlier, we would have to shift our counseling services around district-wide, and it's possible. We absolutely could do it. It just goes back to with the needs that we're experiencing in the district. I don't know if that would be a good idea. However, we could do it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I
I'm
put it
just
up
trying
there
to
as not-
understand that, you know, you're filling some positions that you were originally gonna, you know, in a different option, we're gonna get rid of it. I was just trying to understand the rationale. I did have one other question. How many teaching assistants are in the district?
4.
So that's all of them, basically.
Correct.
So I guess, I know you list them as non-instructional, but aren't they part of the teachers union?
Yeah, and they could easily be under instructional, and you know, that is probably more semantics than anything.
Yeah,
Because
no, I understand. Yeah, I just,
you're right.
so I was just wondering about, you know, seniority and, you know, tenure, right? Because some of them have been there a while, right?
Correct.
Is that going to get in your way of making those reductions, I guess?
Well, with teaching assistants, there wouldn't be any seniority.
Okay, so
We eliminated all of them.
Right.
But can I go back to your question about the secondary math and English? You know,
Yeah.
that's an area that in 2018-19, we didn't fill positions. And we're at a point where in order to offer what we're offering, we would need to replace those 2 positions. If we don't, then we would absolutely have to reduce the number of classes we're offering. And I go back to, if you look at what our fundamental requirements are, we can meet our fundamental requirements. But in knowing what we've provided here, not filling those 2 positions in particular would impact our ability to offer all of those options. And I'm saying more high level, college level, beyond just the basic requirements. So again, if our goal is to impact the fewest amount of people, option A could work. It will have impacts on our programming for sure. It will have impacts on student offerings and opportunities for sure. But it would have the lowest amount of impact on people. if you look at option C or even B, again, it's taking the idea, taking the lens of, we have those positions, the math, English, and counselor, that we really should replace, and here's how we would make up that savings. Because those 3 positions, as you can see, that's significant savings if we don't replace those. But it's also significant impact on programming, and that's the balance that we're going to have to, come to an agreement on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I was just trying to understand the trade-offs,
Yep.
Okay.
In the elementary level.
Mr. Balzani has a question. I just want to bring it up for everybody. The question is, are all 5 aides in the elementary level? At this point, not necessarily, because we have aides in all 4 buildings in all 3 levels, and I know we have at least 1, possibly 2 retirements. So we would have to look at how those retirements, where they are, and then shift resources to where the need is. But the highest density of teacher aides are in the elementary level. So I can say right now it is not definitely only elementary, but that's where the most teacher aides are. So thank you, Mr. Balzani, for that question.
Your dollar amount is just salaries?
No, that's everything. That's fringe benefits and salaries.
Okay, so even if you were to replace some of these retirement positions, they would obviously start at a smaller dollar amount, correct?
Yes.
But don't forget, when you see those numbers, that's full benefits included.
Right.
So when we hire somebody, they have full benefits, so that's not salary, so just.
Right, okay.
But Melinda, there would be savings because someone coming in versus someone leaving, there's going to be some savings on salary, correct?
Right. And then the way that you kind of decided, I guess, that a secondary math would be more important than special education or a reading teacher, is that by talking with, obviously your building administrators, and I guess I'm just trying to figure out, is it more critical to have a reading teacher or the math,
Yeah, no, great question. We have worked as a team over the last 2 months, building principals, directors, assistant superintendent, leadership team. Everyone is weighed in on, and not everyone is in full agreement, believe me. No one feels good because we've already been down this road before, and so no one is saying, yeah, this is expendable, this isn't. But the secondary math and English in particular would be areas that would stretch us extremely thin, and that is per conversations with building principals, and then them knowing the master schedule and course offerings. So yes, that is with all building administration weighing in.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to make,
Jason,
I would never make these options up just myself. It was full team effort.
Yeah.
It would appear that the 3 options are a little bit categorized. You can kind of see the instructional heavy on option A, and then maybe more of the grounds and building aspect with mechanics and bus and all in C. Again, not exclusive categories by any means, but a little bit defined by that. Is there any autonomy in the options as they stand, but maybe the first option being a little more instructional, maybe maintaining the counselor, but then grabbing a mechanic, so that there's, the integrity of the 3 are the same, but maybe one line item jiggles a little? Or would you prefer that the way you presented them, that's already been done inherently, and we're not going to start moving lines around?
No, I would say there's definitely room for those conversations. I can say right now definitively nothing is in concrete. It was more about trying to balance one over the other. But to your point, Jamie, no, we could certainly move around, and that's why I wanted you to see these tonight, because we still have next meeting to talk about that. So I can certainly make some adjustments and come up with some additional options, or you know, reformat, move around some of these items to create new options.
Yeah, the last thing I want to do is look at dismantling, because I can just imagine the heart and soul and effort that went into these. So that was not my intent, but I just wondered a individual line you really struck a chord with me when you spoke a bit about the social, emotional, and mental health needs. And so I thought, like, I like all of this, but that, I wonder if that's where maybe a buildings and ground, you know, one item kind of thing. But I certainly wouldn't go into the minutia of, you know, line by line and switching things up. I just kind of saw a one idea maybe.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Jason,
Yes.
has there been any thought with those two secondary positions, the Math 712, the English 712, has there been any thoughts or discussions about potentially sharing resources with a neighboring school district? I know that in years past, language teachers have been shared between districts. Is that something that would be feasible, or would that just be, you know, too much for us to reach out to ask someone to come on board with us sort of part-time?
No, I mean, we've had conversations in the past. It certainly is an option, Tom, and because of where we are location-wise, we do have some neighboring schools that are close in proximity. So, yeah, that's certainly something we could explore. And I do want to apologize, and I'm sure you're seeing it as much as I am. There is a typo in the librarian under option A. I will fix that before that goes out to the public. I am so sorry. I apologize for that.
So Jason, at our next board meeting, are you going to be then letting us know, obviously these are our three options, but give us the final, this is, you know, what you think is best for our district?
I will give you a recommendation with the idea being that certainly we want all of your input and thoughts and suggestions included in it, so that it's you know, there's an agreement. But yes, I will be making a recommendation.
Okay.
So I will move on to the recommendations, because that's probably where this is where we'll kind of conclude for tonight. So our preliminary recommendations, first of all, this is something that we've kept in place now, and this is part of that financially healthy and sustainability. Our goal will be to try and continue to keep that 4% or as close as we can. So this has changed. Last meeting, we had said we think we should try to exceed the tax levy limit. Our recommendation tonight would be to not, and it's 1.94 now. However, the second bullet, I think we can make the argument and we can make the strong case that if it's not this year, in a future year, we're going to need to. And that will be some further conversation. Now, Melinda, to your point, eventually we will need to make a recommendation. My recommendation is that we go to 1.6 million based on the information that we have in front of us now. And whatever that option is, we'll come to a conclusion. But the number went from 1.3 to 1.6, and that's where we'll continue to do some work before next meeting. And then I will leave this as the last recommendation. This has not changed. Just remember that we receive significant aid. Up to 90% of the cost of transportation purchases are aided. This is one of the best investments we can make in the entire district. Therefore, we continue to believe that this is a good plan moving forward. So I'll stop there. I think it's almost 7 o'clock. Oh, it's a little over 7 o'clock. Are there any other questions before we break and then go into our regular meeting?
One quick question. even if we go to 1.6, we're still gonna have to take money out of reserves, right?
Correct. And Cynthia, do you want to weigh in on that?
By going to 1.6, it would reduce the amount that we would plan to use reserves by about 300,000, and we strongly do recommend doing that. Back to what Mr. Van Fossen said at the beginning about the concerns with cuts. Otherwise, you will be using all the reserves that you can, and there's really no flexibility in having to suddenly use the reserves next year. But
Right.
there is still substantial use of the reserves, even with the $1.6 billion of cuts.
Right. Okay. And that number is 639K, something like that?
That's the increase right now. So you're using in this current model 1,192,000, and we're trying to drop that by about 300,000.
Okay, okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Thanks, Cynthia.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys want to take, say, let's see, it's 7:05. You want to take about 5 minutes just to, a break before we start the regular board meeting?
We would appreciate that.
That sounds good to me. Yep.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so 7:10. Right,
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
okay, thanks. We'll be back.